0 forward, drifting to the right a little. 30 seconds. Forward, drift. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're going to be busy for a minute.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own.
Imagine you've trained for this moment your entire life. You've passed every test, survived every simulation. You are, by every measure, one of the most mentally prepared human beings on the planet. And then the door opens, and everything you thought you understood about yourself, about us, about this world, breaks. This isn't science fiction. This is documented, verified, and it has happened to nearly every single human being who has ever left this planet. I'm Voss, and what I'm about to tell you took scientists 40 years to take seriously. Before we go further, I need you to understand something. The people this happened to, they weren't dreamers. They weren't philosophers or poets. They were engineers, fighter pilots, military commanders. People trained to be skeptical. People trained to observe, report, and move on. And yet, every single one of them came back changed. Not subtly changed. Not, I saw something beautiful changed. Permanently, irreversibly, molecularly changed. The term was coined in 1987 by a space philosopher named Frank White. He called it the overview effect. But the experience itself, that had been quietly dismantling astronauts since the very first humans left Earth's atmosphere.
6, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. Final visit to enhance the vision of Hubble.
Nobody talked about it publicly for a long time. Because how do you explain something that has no language? February 9th, 1971. Edgar Mitchell is 3 days into his return from the moon, Apollo 14. One of only 12 human beings to ever walk on the lunar surface. He's sitting in the command module. The Earth is visible through the window. And then, without warning, something happens inside his brain that he will spend the rest of his life trying to explain. Mitchell described it like this: a sudden, overwhelming sense that everything is connected. Not as an idea, not as a feeling, as a fact. Like every molecule in his body, every atom in that spacecraft, every particle of light hitting Earth's atmosphere was part of one single living system, he said. And I want you to really hear this. The presence of divinity became almost palpable. And I knew that life in the universe was not just an accident based on random processes. This knowledge came to me directly, noetically. Noetically, meaning not through logic, not through data, through direct, unmediated knowing. A military-trained astronaut, a man of science, using the word divinity. Now, you might be thinking, 3 days in space, alone, probably sleep-deprived. That's a hallucination. That's stress. That's the brain misfiring. And that's exactly what scientists thought for 20 years, until they started listening to the others. Ron Garan, space shuttle astronaut, 177 days in space. He looked down at Earth and said, it looked like a living, breathing organism, but at the same time, extremely fragile. A paper-thin layer, protecting every living thing from death. Paper-thin. He kept using that phrase, paper-thin. Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut, commander of the ISS. He said the experience made every human conflict feel heartbreakingly unnecessary. Not unfortunate, not sad, heartbreakingly unnecessary. Michael Collins, Apollo 11. The man who orbited the moon alone while Armstrong and Aldrin walked on it. He wrote, I really believe that if the political leaders of the world could see their planet from a distance of, say, 50,000 miles, their outlook would be fundamentally changed. Different missions, different decades, different nationalities, same experience, same words, same permanent transformation. By the time researchers started formally studying this, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't space madness. Something was happening to the human brain at a specific distance from Earth, and nobody could explain why. Here's where it gets fascinating. Your brain, right now, as you watch this, is running a background program, constantly, without your awareness. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It's the system responsible for your sense of self. The story your brain tells about who you are, where you end, where the world begins. You are here. Everything else is out there. That separation, that boundary, is one of the most fundamental structures in human consciousness. It's also, apparently, altitude dependent. Researchers studying the overview effect found that at a certain distance from Earth, something disrupts that boundary. The self, that hard line between you and everything else, begins to dissolve, not disappear, dissolve. Like the astronauts could still think, still function, still breathe, but the story of separation their brain had been telling for decades suddenly felt like a story, not a fact. A story. And once you see a story as a story, you can never fully unsee it. There's a clinical term for this kind of experience. Researchers call it a self-transcendent experience. A moment where the neural architecture of the self temporarily reconfigures. It's the same neurological mechanism behind deep meditation, certain psychedelic experiences, moments of profound grief or profound love. Except from space, it's involuntary. Nobody chooses it. It just happens. The universe reaches inside your skull and rearranges the furniture. Now I want to sit with you in something uncomfortable for a moment, because this is the part that gets under my skin every time I think about it. We have verified, documented, peer-reviewed evidence that seeing Earth from space permanently rewires the human brain toward compassion, interconnection, and the dissolution of conflict. We have astronauts, trained skeptics, returning from space and dedicating their lives to environmentalism, to peace, to humanitarian work. Edgar Mitchell founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Ron Garan created a humanitarian organization called Fragile Oasis. Multiple astronauts have written books, given TED Talks, changed careers, all trying to communicate one single idea. From up there, none of our divisions make sense. And yet, somewhere below them, while they floated in that transformative silence, people were going to war, drawing new borders, burning things down over differences that from 250 miles up are completely invisible.
And when Hitler decided the time was right, Germany went to war by American soldiers of every color and religion, who smashed across the Normandy beaches and drove on through to the heart of Germany.
The overview effect doesn't last forever. Astronauts return, they readjust. The default mode network quietly reassembles the story of self. The boundary comes back, but the memory of its absence, that stays. And that memory changes people permanently. Here's what I keep coming back to. You don't need to go to space to understand this intellectually. The physics are simple. The research is clear. The testimonies are consistent across 6 decades of human spaceflight. But understanding it intellectually and feeling it are two completely different things. Joanna Macy, a philosopher featured in the Overview documentary, said something that I think about constantly. She said, you don't have to go to space to experience the overview effect. You just have to genuinely reckon with the reality of what you're seeing when you look at a photograph of Earth from space. Not glance at it, reckon with it. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it before you move on. Every person you've ever loved is on that. Every person you've ever hated is on that. Every war ever fought, every border ever drawn, every belief system ever constructed, every act of kindness and every act of cruelty in human history, on that. And it's held together by an atmosphere so thin that if Earth were the size of a basketball, you couldn't feel it with your fingertip. The astronauts who saw this didn't become different people. They just finally saw what was already true. The question isn't why it changes them. The question is, why doesn't it change us? The overview effect is real. The neuroscience is documented. The transformation is verified. And somewhere right now, there's a human being floating 250 miles above you, looking down, having their entire understanding of reality quietly dismantled. I wonder what they're thinking about. I'm Voss. If this made you think, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.